With yet another potential government shutdown arriving in just 11 days, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson met with Republicans in conference this morning to discuss possible avenues to extend government funding while continuing to work on the appropriations bills. Well, in the Senate, Democrats appear intent on springing another massive spending package on the country, an all too familiar year-end pattern. But with just a few legislative weeks remaining in 2023, how could this all play out? Well, joining me to discuss this and much more, Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. He serves on the Senate Budget Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Johnson, welcome back to the program. Always great to see you.
Oh, Tony, glad to be back.
So first, news just coming out about the president's request of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for a 3-day pause in Israel's efforts to rid the threat of Hamas. That doesn't sound like a pause. That sounds like a ceasefire.
Well, what we ought to do is we ought to support Israel in their ability to, in their right to defend itself and to destroy Hamas, and leave it up to Israel in terms of how they're going to go about doing that. I mean, Israel's fully aware of the public pressure they're going to be under. They are going to do everything they can to avoid civilian casualties. They gave Palestinians all the time in the world to get out of the war zone. Unfortunately, Hamas didn't allow an awful lot of people to get out because they like using their own citizens as human shields. That's the type of people that Israel's fighting. We need to let them take the fight to Hamas the way they determine and not interfere with them.
Support them, stand alongside them. A part of that is the funding package that the House has advanced, but now in the Senate, we see Senator Schumer, the Senate leader, the Democratic leader, wanting to bundle all of these things together, refusing to bring to the floor the bill from the House that provided $14.3 billion in aid to Israel. What's going to happen there in the Senate?
Well, first of all, Senate Republicans have to realize that in the House, we have a majority. We're in the minority in the Senate. And so the natural Republican leader is the Speaker of the House in the House. And we need to support him and not undermine him. And he's let us know. He came to lunch last week to certainly convey to the senators what his challenges were and ask for our support. And one of the things he told us is he cannot pass a combined supplemental. It's got to be bit by bit. And so he passed the support for Israel. I completely agree with that. Plus, he paid for it. What a novel concept. Take a few $1 billion out of the IRS's budget so they don't have quite the ability to harass middle-class Americans and actually pay for the support for Israel. So I think we should be completely supportive of his efforts and supportive of Israel. The fact of the matter is the supplemental that is proposed by the president, there's controversial elements in that. It's going to take time to pass that. I'm not sure Israel has that time. So let's move the Israel package first. And then anything we do, for example, to support Ukraine, absolutely must be attached to real border security with benchmarks. We've got a group of Republicans working on strong border security provisions. I support that. But we have a president that wants an open border and is lawless. I mean, cannot be expected to faithfully execute the laws we pass. So we need to hold his feet to the fire by actually having benchmarks tied to the funding levels.
So let me ask you this, Senator Johnson, is that shared among your Republican colleagues? Because if you stick together, you can probably accomplish that.
We had a very good discussion at lunch today, and I'm encouraged. I think enough of us realize that just passing the right language in a law is not going to work for this president. So table stakes is going to be benchmarks so that over 12 months, and that's what I suggested, it took President Trump 12 months from the absolute peak of his border crisis, by the way, caused by the unlawful deferred action on childhood arrival memorandum that Obama initiated. But it took him 12 months to go from his peak to his trough, where we only had 17,500 people encountered. I think that was in April of 2020, before President Biden took over. And last month we had 270,000 encounters at the southwest border. So it's a 9-day difference. It took Trump 12 months. I think we ought to expect the same thing out of Biden, is get Democrats to pass true border security language and then put benchmarks in there over 12 months to get us down to those Trump numbers.
Now, back to the House Speaker and the fact that he came over, spoke to Senate Republicans. Are you finding among your colleagues there in the Senate that they're going to stand with the new Speaker?
Yeah, I think the speaker did a great job laying out his challenges, laying out his principles. I mean, what a concept, to actually having governing principles and sticking to them. So, no, I heard nothing but strongly positive words after his meeting with us last week, and I would expect strong support here in the Senate for his efforts.
Senator, you're one of the solid fiscal conservatives in the Senate, constantly pounding away of fiscal responsibility is needed, something that's a lost concept. I mean, we're now paying, I think we're approaching, what, $1 trillion now just in interest on the national debt. We're down to the wire on another CR, and you may have heard the clip earlier. The Republicans met in the House. I talked to the Speaker last night. They're trying to find a way forward. But now you have the Senate saying they're going to combine the remaining 9 funding bills all into one, another one of these huge spending packages. What are we going to see there in the Senate?
I often say this is a grotesquely dysfunctional place, but we have a very well-honed process for plundering and mortgaging our children's future. And we're seeing that play out. It's don't pass appropriation bills during the year, come up to the end of the fiscal year, claim crisis if we shut the government down, do a CR that expires before a holiday, and then drop a massive omnibus or 9-bill minibus on people's desks. Nobody reads it. They pass it real quick and we forget about it. That's the cycle we're trying to break. So again, completely support Republicans in the House that want to do CRs long enough to allow the House to pass their appropriation bills. What I would argue for the House is you have to give the Senate enough time to pass our bills as individually as possible and then conference the two. So we certainly ought to do a CR that takes us past the end of the year, right, so we don't have this pressure under Christmas break.
Right.
And then we may have to give ourselves some more time so that we can pass appropriation bills in a more thoughtful manner, giving them more scrutiny in both chambers and then conference those. It's the only way we start returning to regular order. If we do that, in, let's say, January, February, March, we set ourselves up for actually having a true regular order process for funding fiscal year 2025 in April, May, June, July, August, September of next year.
And I think that's exactly what the Speaker's trying to do there in the House, to give them that time to get things back the way it should be. Final question for you, Senator Johnson. Before entering into the Senate, into public life, you worked as an accountant for a time. Last week we had on the program Chairman Schumer regarding the Biden family and this latest information from the bank records that President Biden received $40,000, showed up in his bank account, just happened to be around the same time that the big guy was promised to get something. With that background, do you think that there is evidence there that we are seeing evidence being revealed that suggests that there was corruption there with the former vice president?
No, I thought Senator Grassley and I laid out enough evidence, certainly to convince anybody who looked at it probably not to vote for Joe Biden, but that was covered up and censored by the media. It's very incriminating against the Bidens. $40,000 just happens to be 10% for the big guy of the $400,000 payment. It's also incriminating in terms of the mishandled or corrupt investigation by the FBI of the Bidens. Senator Grassley, as a whistleblower, said that the FBI had 40 different confidential human sources, but they also had this thing called the Foreign Influence Task Force. Seems their primary job was to, what my staff calls, catch and kill. Right. Identify derogatory information on the Bidens and then swoop into those offices and say, oh, that's just Russian disinformation, shut down your investigation.
Senator, I shouldn't have thrown that out with just a minute left, but we'll finish that conversation another time. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got to take a break.